and welcome everyone to today's Che Alaska webinar, which is titled Energy Justice Solutions in Rural Alaska. My name is Sarah. I'm the Communications Coordinator with Alaska Community Action on Toxics, or ACAT. And Che Alaska is a program of ACAT and Collaborative for Health and Environment. And it's also part of Che's international coalition of over 5,000 individuals across the globe. For today's webinar, we'll have a Q&A session at the end. So at any point throughout the webinar, you'll be able to send your questions using the Q&A box feature at the bottom of your screen, and we'll try to get to as many questions as we can at the end. So I'll jump right into introducing our three speakers today. Jasmine Jemewouk is still trying to join, so hopefully she'll be able to join us at the end in a little bit, but she's ACAT's Water Quality and Community Health Protection Coordinator, and she's been working to oppose various mines around Alaska. And then we have Dr. Philip Wight, who is an Assistant Professor of History and Arctic Northern Studies at the University of Alaska. He's an energy and environmental historian with a focus on infrastructure, mobility, and technology. And we have Petla Noden, who is a solar trainer, renewable energy consultant, an alumnus of the Tribal Solar Accelerator Fund and Grid Alternatives. And his goal is to strengthen all facets of sustainability, especially in capacity building and streamlining renewable energy projects in Alaska. Thank you all for being here. And now I will hand it over to you, Phil, to get us started.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Sarah. And let me make sure that you guys can see my slides. Great to be here with you and Petla. I'm looking forward to the conversation afterwards. Hopefully a few of the various things I'm going to talk about today directly connect with Petla's expertise. So Sarah, as you mentioned, I am a historian. I come to this from an academic perspective, but I'm also very interested in what is happening on the ground in Alaska today and some of the overall trends that we have been seeing over the past decade or two. So, I think a good place to begin this, energy justice is such a capacious term, right? It has so many different meanings. And what I want to really focus on today is what does energy justice look like in rural Alaska, especially around heat and around electricity, right? Often we talk about energy, but there's a lot that goes into the idea of energy, and we really need to distinguish between how we are using the energy, right? Are we using, are we producing electricity, or do we really want to create heat for our homes? So historically, at least, in the 20th century, when electricity first came to Alaska, probably in the 1880s on steamships, human-generated electricity. And then, we see the first major terrestrial electricity applications down in Juneau in the 1890s. But as electricity came to Alaska, it was not brought evenly to the people, right? It tended to be in these gold rush settlements, and the distribution of electricity was quite unequal. And I'll pull up this great map here that shows what this looked like on the ground. So this may be a little hard to read, but as a historian, who spends a lot of time in dusty archives, I love these historical sources. So this is a map of all of the installed electrical capacity in Alaska in the mid-1960s. And what you can see when you look at this is that, there's plenty of power plants in Anchorage and Fairbanks and Juneau, but rural villages predominantly were not electrified in the 1960s. So it took the creation of the Alaska Village Electric Cooperative, or AVEC, to really bring electrification to rural Alaska. So I think we should see the emergence of AVEC as part of this trend towards redressing energy injustice in rural Alaska. And bringing electricity to rural Alaska brought tremendous benefits. But the new technology of electrification also brought new dependencies, right? Namely that of reliance on diesel fuel. All of these villages that electrified basically did so through these diesel generator sets. And in the 1960s, the cost of diesel was a little bit lower. But then in 1973, we have the era of oil embargo, and the price of diesel shoots through the roof, right? It's literally 10 times higher, maybe a decade later. So this brings tremendous burden to these communities. And there is a real focus at this moment. How do we lower the cost of power? How do we reduce the environmental problems of diesel fuel, right? Bringing diesel to these villages, tremendous logistical hurdles and costs, transporting it throughout rural Alaska, most of the time brought by barge, but if you can't bring it by barge, you have to bring it by airplane, right? Phenomenally expensive. So another important development in this trend was also the creation of PCE, or power cost equalization. Many folks here are probably familiar with it, but I just want to define our basic terms. And what was happening at this moment is Prudhoe Bay was developed in 1968. Trans-Alaska Pipeline System was built shortly thereafter. And the state of Alaska, for the first time in its history, had billions and billions of dollars to spend. One of the most intelligent things that the state did with its money is it turned that oil money and it invested in electric infrastructure, specifically a series of hydroelectric dams called Four Dam Pool and the Bradley Lake Dam, and the construction of the intertie between Fairbanks and Anchorage. So basically took oil dollars, petrodollars, and turned them into renewable energy for the state. The problem is, other than the Four Dam Pool, which did benefit rural Alaskan communities like Valdez and Wrangell and Kodiak, that infrastructure really did not benefit Western Alaska. And so PCE was created as a kind of energy justice mechanism to make sure that communities that were reliant on high cost diesel had a subsidy from the state. And there were also efforts at this time to displace high cost diesel. There are some coastal communities that could use hydropower, but most did not have access to hydroelectric power. So this creates the fundamental conundrum that we kind of have today, right? People have come to rely on electricity. It provides extraordinary value, but it's so expensive. And it has all these, of course, negative environmental qualities. So starting in the 1980s, there were efforts to bring wind power to some of these communities. That first generation of wind, by and large, was a pretty big failure. Those turbines were not made for harsh Alaskan conditions, and they basically just ended up as junk or lawn furniture. But starting in the 1990s, new generations of wind turbines were deployed, and these worked far better and could bring far more benefits to rural Alaskan communities. By late 2011, the state had 27 projects using wind power that had been constructed or commissioned throughout Alaska. So that, very brief 10,000 foot history, a little bit about, energy justice, the attempts to bring electricity and lower cost, lower pollution electricity to rural Alaska. Next, I want to talk about three historic, contemporary, and in-process projects, which I think are really inspiring and offer both some lessons and some trends that we can see about what's happening in rural Alaska. So the first of these is the Chananik Wind Group, which was formed in 2005 by the electrical utility boards and managers of small villages in Southwest Alaska, including in Kipnuk, in Kagianak, and basically this wind group was formed as a tribally based consortium with the objective of bringing together local villages to harness their wind resources. And the idea here was basically that, a single wind turbine in any of these villages wasn't going to provide the benefits that a wind system was going to bring, right? And this was also about making sure that the wealth of these communities stayed in the communities, right? Making sure that you had local individuals who were trained, who could service these projects. And, fundamentally, this was also about preserving the way of life in these communities, right? Making sure that, there was jobs and opportunity in rural Alaska. And so when these projects were built, and I'll talk about them a little bit more here in a moment, there was really an emphasis on training local workers, keeping hiring of outside labor to a minimum, and really making sure that local people had expertise in the tower construction and the turbine installation. And what this wind group demonstrated was the value of hybrid renewable energy. And what I mean by hybrid is that this system took wind power, and the diesel generators were still there, when the wind wasn't blowing. But the really brilliant thing about this system is there was a recognition that one of the highest costs in the community wasn't simply electricity, it was heat, right? All of us here in Alaska know that to put it simply, heat is the tail that wags the dog, right? Heat drives a lot of our energy decisions. We have to figure out a way to have sustainable heat, and ideally to decarbonize heat. And so that was the brilliance of this project. They also installed these electric thermal generators in people's homes. Basically, it's like a stack of bricks where you run an electric current through it. So when you have excess wind energy, you can go to heat people's homes. And that heat provided to tribal members was about 50% less expensive than diesel fuel. So the whole goal of this project was to save more than 35,000 gallons of fuel per year. And the first one of these wind heat systems began operation in Kong in November of 2012. It was also really important because the idea was to start building a more effective and efficient energy system that used less fuel. They cost less to operate, and they made more use of local resources, not just the wind, but also local labor. So the second project I want to talk about, just moving up in time here, and actually I'm going to go in a slightly different order than I have it in my slides. So I really want to talk about solar plus storage. And the first thing to say, solar in Alaska, right? But it's dark so much of the year. Does this really work? And the historical evidence is very clear that solar photovoltaic, as Petla will talk about here, is quite effective in Alaska. And the reason that it's effective is that this is a technology that has evolved quite a lot over the past few decades. My energy history class, I always talk about basically the first commercial or the first PV panel to be deployed, which was on a satellite in the 1950s. And solar power today is so much more powerful and cheaper than it was on that first Vanguard satellite. So solar has the benefit of no moving parts, very little maintenance, very high value proposition. And one of the first major arrays up here, which demonstrated not only the value of solar, but solar combined with batteries, right? What we call solar plus storage. And this was the Shungnak Kobuk Community Solar Project up in the Northwest Arctic Borough. 225 kilowatt project paired with batteries. And one of the reasons I think this project is so important is not just the technology. The technology is impressive. We'll talk about it here in a moment. But it also involved a tribal IPP. What do I mean by that? This is a tribally owned independent power producer. And this was the first time the Alaska Village Electric Cooperative entered into an agreement with an independent power producer to buy power back from them, right? So this is going to create a really important model, I think, for Alaska, or certainly it's a model that is trying to be replicated right now. And this array was such a big deal because Shungnak and Kobuk have some of the highest electricity prices in Northwest Alaska and the US. And the whole idea of this solar plus storage, obviously the sun isn't shining all the time, but when it is shining, it can be really powerful, especially in the spring. Most people don't realize that actually you get the most solar energy in the spring when we've got the snow on the ground, right? You've got the albedo and the sun, the snow is reflecting the sunlight. And so the goal for this array was to displace somewhere between 10 and 30% of the diesel used to produce electricity in these villages. It was also constructed with local labor, with indigenous labor. I believe Ed Byfelt worked on this with the Alaska Native Renewable Industries group. And it started producing power in the spring of 22. And what was really amazing is that it allowed the village to turn off their diesel generators, right? Not many rural communities in Alaska have the ability to shut down their diesel power plants and still provide power. And the estimate is that this system is bringing a benefit of approximately $100,000 per year to Shungnak and Kobuk after expenses are accounted for, right? So really, really promising. I should also say that in addition to the Northwest Arctic Borough, Tanana Chiefs Conference is now working on deploying dozens of these solar plus storage projects. Their first major project was in Hughes. It was a 120 kilowatt array. Again, they're aiming, they've already seen savings of 10 to 30%, and they're aiming to reduce diesel consumption by up to 50%. And TCC recently won a large grant, the Solar for All grant, in conjunction with the Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium and the Alaska Housing Finance Corporation. And it's for these large community solar arrays, like what was built, actually much larger than what was built at Shungnak and Kobuk. These 1 to 5 megawatt arrays. These are pretty sizable installations. And, the hope is that TCC can bring similar kind of value to its constituents all throughout interior Alaska. And Sarah, I know I'm pretty close to time. Can I go over a few extra minutes? Okay, great. So I do want to come back to the Northwest Arctic Borough because I think they have been very aggressive and ambitious at deploying a number of these different technologies. So, Shungnak and Kobuk, obviously in the Northwest Arctic Borough, and the Northwest Arctic Borough recently won a grant to basically install more of these solar plus storage facilities. And one of the high level takeaways here is, look, ever since we electrified rural Alaska has been hooked on diesel. And we have made those facilities more efficient over time, right? There's things that we've done to the internal combustion engines, but the move that we've seen is to bring in hybrid renewable energy to displace diesel. And wind has been very effective at that, right? Alaska has more renewable energy hybrid microgrids than anywhere else on the planet, right? But solar, I think, is really adding one of the greatest value propositions because solar has just been getting cheaper and cheaper every year, right? Really unbelievably cheap. I think in the early 2000s, the only group that was close to predicting how cheap solar would get was actually Greenpeace. And so what we're seeing here with the solar plus storage is that it can really displace a lot of diesel, provide a lot of value. The last technology I want to talk about here just very briefly is what the Northwest Arctic Borough is trying to do with solar powered heat pumps. So for those who don't know, a heat pump is basically an air conditioner that runs in reverse. It's really magical because it doesn't produce power. It just moves heat, right? So all of us actually have a heat pump probably in our homes, right? Your refrigerator, your freezer is a version of a heat pump. It's just moving heat around. So what's so cool about this heat pump project in the Northwest Arctic Borough is that The idea is use solar electricity when it is available, right? Install, the first iteration of this, I believe they installed about 1 kilowatt on people's houses or on their properties. So basically, when the sun is out, when it's producing electricity, that electricity runs the heat pump, and the heat pump provides, in theory, low cost, low carbon heat for the interior of these homes. And not only low carbon heat, but it also has an air filter, right? So it can filter the air. This is of great importance, I know, in interior Alaska because of the wildfires we have, right? And it can also provide air conditioning in the summer, which 20 years ago, people might have rolled their eyes, but we all know summers are getting hotter and hotter, right? It's really important to be able to stay comfortable and stay safe in our homes. So the Northwest Arctic Borough first, inaugurated this project 2019, 2020 or so, and deployed this on a fairly limited scale, but they recently got an over $50 million grant to put solar panels and heat pumps basically in 850 homes throughout the Northwest Arctic Borough. So again, this is another innovative way of trying to displace diesel, right? Reduce costs, reduce carbon. And what I will say is that with all of these technologies, right, the deployment is not seamless. There are always problems with these technologies. I've heard that there have been some issues with the heat pumps in various villages like Ambler, right? All technology, as we know, has its issues, has its downfalls. But the overall trends that we're seeing, I think, are really important, which is moving more towards renewables and creating these hybrid systems that can not only make our electricity cleaner, but they can also displace diesel fuel. So I'll leave it there and save any questions for later. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil, for your excellent presentation. That was great. And Jasmine was able to join us on her phone, so I will go ahead now and unmute you. And we'll see if that works.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep, that's great.
Awesome. Hi, everybody. My name is Jasmine Jemewouk. I'm the Water Quality and Community Health Protection Coordinator, and I work for the Alaska Community Action on Toxics. I am Inupiaq, Yupik, and Cherokee, and I'm from Elam, Alaska. And if you don't know where that is, it's located in the Bering Straits region. It's one of the last stops on the Iditarod Trail. So when I started this position over a year ago, I quickly learned that a lot of mining takes place on or near Indigenous lands. Right now, Indigenous communities across Alaska are facing an uptick in mining for critical minerals for a green transition to renewable energy, and it has become a national security issue. The United States is looking to mine domestically, and so they're looking at Alaska. Alaska is such a resource-rich state, so it is important that when we move forward with this, we are engaging with our community leaders when planning and developing their natural and mineral resources. The goal is to protect our future generations. That's what we're fighting for. We're fighting for the protection of our subsistence resources during this green transition. And this is a form of energy injustice due to the harmful mining practices and their effect on human health. So the narrative around critical minerals values corporate profit over community well-being. And in Elam, we are currently facing the threat of a developing uranium mine by a Canadian company, Panther Minerals. This is the second company attempting to mine near my homelands. The first company was shut down after community opposition in 2008. The proposed uranium mine right now, it sits on 11 claims of Bureau of Land Management land, and the other 18 claims are on state land. Luckily, the Bureau of Land Management denied their permits, but the Department of Natural Resources managing the state land approved permits for exploratory drilling. They are planning on taking 30 to 50 core samples at 11 different sites to try to see what the status of the uranium, what the content of the uranium is on that site. And so they are trying to push this narrative that Elam could be the uranium capital of the world. They are hoping to transform our economy, and they don't understand that our economy depends on a healthy and sustainable environment. Due to our location, it's very rural. You can only get there by plane, and it's very difficult to have reliable sources of food, and we are very traditional, and we rely on subsisting year-round as all of the seasons come and go, and the migratory animals come and go. We rely on being able to safely collect our subsistence resources. And so our primary concern is about our health. We are concerned about uranium mining and exposure to cancer-causing radiation. The cancer rate among Navajo increased dramatically during the period when uranium mining was allowed on native lands. And the Navajo have since banned uranium mining due to its adverse effects on the environment and human health. So it's just so important that we have regulations that protect our people and our resources, and they support local voices in decision-making about resources extraction. Unfortunately, Elam was kind of left in the dark when this mining company came in to try to mine, and they had found out through news articles, and they were not engaging in an open line of communication. And so they really didn't give our community leaders a chance to be a part of it or have any voice in it. And so the Elam tri-entities, the governments that operate there, they passed a resolution requesting government-to-government consultation, but unfortunately, due to the current regulations, it's not illegal for them to just approve the permits and allow them to drill holes on our watershed. The uranium mine is located 30 miles north of Elam, and it's directly on our watershed. And so we are extremely concerned. It feels super unfair that we have no say in the Department of Natural Resources approving exploratory drilling. And we are going to just continue to get our voices in the rooms that are making decisions. And we are going to continue to fight this every time it comes back. This is the second time we've had to protest against uranium mining in Elam, and it's for a regrettable substitute for renewables. And so we just really need that balance and Indigenous leadership to be included. And so thank you for allowing me to speak. And I'm sorry I couldn't join with my on my computer. So I hope this was helpful, and I'm happy to answer any questions at the end.
Thank you, Jasmine, for highlighting that important aspect of what is true energy justice, and we're really glad you were able to join us by phone. So now, Petla, I think we'll hand it over to you. Thank you for being here. You're still muted, actually, Petla.
Good morning. Can you hear me now? Okay. So, my name is Petla Noden. I am here residing in my homeland of Dillingham, Alaska, traditionally called Chaville, which means murky water. I am a fellow alumni from the Tribal Solar Accelerator Fund, Great Alternatives. Um, that was a really good and wonderful time, and it was a whole year-long fellowship, and it really just allowed me to do what I love doing, which is study renewable energy and basically work in ways to try to curb carbon emissions as they are today. So my title of a renewable energy consultant comes from one of my friends. I graduated, well, I didn't graduate from UA, he did, and he ended up becoming a village corporation president for his region in the Kotlik area. He knew back then in 2009 through 14, when we were going to UAA, that I was really interested in renewable energy. I studied political and environmental science and Alaska Native Studies with the main goal of protecting our land, air, and water here in Dillingham, Alaska. We live on the confluence of the Wood River and the Nishigat, and two of the most productive salmon spawning rivers in the world when it comes to wild salmon. So I went in with the goal of just working in ways to represent the interests of people in my area. And I found myself advocating for renewable energy through our state. I did a little bit of lobbying legislation for clean energy legislation here in Alaska. I attended the Tribal Clean Energy Summit in DC, and I got to meet a lot of people on a federal level who are pushing dollars into the US for renewable energy projects. That was a really good, I enjoyed that. I don't know if this slideshow here. How do I go to the next one? There we go. So here's that stuff. So as I went along figuring how to best represent the interests and the well-being of our airline and water in Dillingham, it led me along to learning about AKST, Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act. In 1972, Alaska was divided into 13 regional corporations, 12 in state, one out for all Native people who were out of state at the time. And we were also, we have 229 federally recognized tribes in Alaska. Mine is Chilean Tribal Council, and there are village corporations that have been set up. Now, the way that those were set up, it's the village corporations have land and the tribal councils didn't. And it used to be where village corporations didn't have the same type of relationship, and it recently changed where those types of tribal entities qualify for and are encouraged to apply for and receive and manage dollars, federal dollars for renewable energy projects. What I like to do is look around our state, find out where these lands are that are owned by village corporations, because village corporations have that government to government relationship with Department of Energy. And right now, there is so much going on the state and the federal level when it comes to tribal entities and renewable energy in the state of Alaska. So as I was saying, one of my friends from UAA, he became a village corporation president for his region, and he called me and asked for my help. And I was very delighted because here I am working in Dillingham on this project here. I've identified 3 village corporations who own land right here in Dillingham. And this happens to be a very good option for a corridor for a road to a boat landing that would benefit the 3 village corporation shareholders. And it also happens to be in a really good area where renewable energy potential exists, such as wind and solar. So I've identified Dillingham a hybrid system. Wind and solar is viable along the coast of the Nishigat Bay here. So the project that I identified, it would include Chogyang Limited, My Village Corporation, Chogyang Limited, Manicotic Natives Limited, and Sagoyok Incorporated. The Sagoyok is the village corporation of the native people of Clark's Point, and Manicotic Natives Limited is the village corporation who owns this land over here. So the project that I'm proposing for Dillingham would incorporate a road to a landing, a solar array on the Dillingham side, a wind farm down to the road, and a solar array on the Manicotic side, and it would incorporate a grid tie between the 2 communities and possibly Clark's Point. So what this would do, it would allow 3 village corporations to form what we learned earlier, IPP. They would form a independent power. They would become an independent power producer. They would form a conglomerate, and they would pool financing from the federal and state financing opportunities and the grants. But that would also allow the 3 village corporations to form this partnership and to identify shareholders within each respective area to become those solar and tower technicians and solar installation. We want to build that capacity, not just going out there and actually pounding the pipes in the ground and putting those solar panels up, but we want the people in region to get into the writing of grants, managing the grants, all of the sectors of renewable energy as they are today, identifying where they are and getting that sort of education in there. So as I was talking about earlier, my title of renewable energy consultant, my friend called me, and like I said, he almost had carte blanche with me. His board of directors and him meshed very well, and they worked really well together, and they were very open, and that is the key ingredient when developing a renewable energy project in the state of Alaska. So when looking at projects in the state of Alaska, there are fundamental things that have to take place. Your village corporation has to have a good relationship with your power producer and also the Department of Energy. So that's kind of a trio as long as your village corporation and your power producer and your Department of Energy, as long as you got good relationships there and open communication, you're able to speed things along and develop these renewable energy projects. So Richard for Cognignant, I think, he was able to move on a hybrid system, and these projects take a lot of relationship building between, like I said, the power producer, the village corporation, and DOE. But these relationships have to be built, energy driven, and the momentum has to keep going. And they have to be designed so they can't fail. And there's a tremendous amount of planning. But so when we looked at his region and area, we identify land that they have, then we identify resources, and then we identify who is the power producer. We look into like what are they burning and how much are they burning, and how do we get the most of our bang for our buck. And oftentimes overlooked is the ability to reduce energy instead of produce energy. So an energy saved is one not spent. So what I mean by that is we're buttoning up our homes and businesses, making things more energy efficient. If you can, you're installing like foam heaters made out of your dryer, you're blowing your heat into the bucket and then it's filtering it out. Things like that. So we're identifying ways that we could better utilize the energy that we have, changing out our light bulbs, insulating our homes, changing out our windows, things like that. And then once we're doing that, then we're producing renewable energy. So the made a good point earlier about solar energy in rural Alaska. It is done incredibly less. It's got the efficiency is shot up, and the price has gone down, and the incentives are there nationwide for any tribal entities in Indian country to really move on renewable energy. So we got them hooked in with ETIP, which is Energy Transition Initiative Partnership Program, and that basically is they partner with the Department of Energy, and they just work together and figure out what they have to do, and they're working on it and they do it. So they got like $50,000 right away for that. And so Kotlik will be moving forward with the energy project and forming a conglomerate. And that's kind of what I'm trying to do for Dillingham. Go to the next slide here. I'm just here we go. So here's a map of Dillingham here. You can see Dillingham there, Clark's Point, Manakota. And I'm proposing a 15-mile grid tie from Dillingham to Manakota, and it would house a solar array on the KMO side, a solar array on Dillingham side with a wind farm in between. And obviously that would include battery banks, just information on the sun and how just readily available it is and what it can do. I pulled some information from a study done in 2005. Doug Watt, V3 Energy, did it for Dillingham and the Bristol Bay region. He was hired by BBNC many years ago. And they did wind studies all over our region. So Dillingham area, this was done at the site where my project is where I'm planning to do it at Kanakanak. And this was a class 3 wind, which is an average of 12-mile-an-hour wind speed. And that's the same as the Fire Island. Now, Fire Island wind is an Anchorage wind farm, and their renewable energy goes directly onto the rail belt, which is from Fairbanks all the way to Homer and everywhere in between. And So that's a different animal. That's a 17.6 megawatt wind farm, and it's the second largest wind farm in the state of Alaska. And it kind of puts things into perspective. Dillingham is an average 2.5 megawatts of energy on the grid any given moment. So we would need a small fraction of that to power our whole city. And you bring up a good point earlier about how we're going to be moving that energy and what we're going to be doing with it. So once we produce and we're delivering electricity, we need to store it for intermittency. Intermittency is when the wind's not blowing, the sun's not shining. We're going to be pulling that renewable energy from battery banks, from flywheels, from a thermal load. Basically, any way we can store it that's going to be more efficient and effective, then we'll store it that way, and we'll let the engineers decide how it's best. But batteries are the key. Batteries are a really good example of energy storage and how to really make a good renewable energy system. Kodiak is a good example of the best renewable energy system. They started with like, I think, a whole megawatt battery bank, and they've grown since. But Kodiak is almost 100% renewable energy. So batteries are really good at storing electricity and pumping it back onto the grid when it's needed. Thermal load is another way to store electricity, but I think it's readily deployable and easily usable. And you brought up that. What I really like is how renewable energy translates to heating homes and businesses. And a good example of that is those electric thermal generators. So basically, plug-in stoves are a way to make the solar and the wind heat our homes and businesses. So when we figure that out and hone it out and make that the standard around Alaska, because the average homeowner is spending $600 a month in the winter to heat your homes and business. Some businesses $30,000 a month, and that's a lot of money. And we're, for what? To burn it into our airline and water again and again. So it only makes sense. The quicker and the better we move forward with renewable energy. So phase one of my project would be to develop a corporation, a cooperative agreement with the tribal entities involved, like I said, the 3 village corporations that all have governmental relationship with the federal government, and they all qualify for federal and state dollars for renewable energy projects. And the key ingredient here is that we need to get really into communicating and having that strong relationship with these 3 entities. So we'd start with a 1 megawatt solar array on Chug Land here in Dillingham, and Chug Young Limited would have to partner with Nishigak Cooperative. Nishigak is our current power producer. They burn an average of, I think, it used to be 10 years ago, it was like $3.5 million a year on diesel. So each tribal entity would negotiate a power purchase agreement, which is basically your going rate. They would purchase, Michigan would purchase energy from the conglomerate, and each would be getting paid respectively to their renewable energy projects. Like Clark's point, if they have if they're generating 8 megawatts and they're producing and delivering 8 megawatts, then they get paid for 8 megawatts. And the way that happens is when you form the independent power producer, you really design the project to capitalize on power cost equalization, which we learned a little bit earlier when the rail belt did benefit from all of that millions and millions of dollars. So there's hydro projects that lessen the price of energy for everybody in Anchorage and that area. So kind of left rural Alaska out of that. And that's where PCE comes in. And that's how we're going to utilize PCE to help pay for these renewable energy projects and really write them into our agreements. So This renewable energy project would incorporate the village corporations, and each respectively would capitalize on utility scale kilowatt sales. We would capitalize in power cost equalization. We would build a boat launch and save on gas and make our routes and trips more safer for commuters in our region, and also provide the education incentives for young people in our region and our shareholders to become power technicians, engineers, electricians, and things of that nature when it comes to capacity building, because it's really important to have that really solid foundation in making sure that we are able to keep these towers operating and generating and not just sitting there, looking mechanisms. So, as I said, the tribal corporations would negotiate terms of a power purchase agreement with Michigan Cooperative, and a former conglomerate would sell electricity to Michigan Cooperative. They would utilize PCE, form an IPP. And these are just a few renewable energy dollars. But right now, if you look at the Department of Energy's website, there's an Office of Indian Energy, and under the Biden administration, there has grown like about so many more different departments within DOE that are really focused on getting this money out the door to any tribal entity in our nation who want to develop renewable energy projects in Indian country. In any capacity they can help, they want to help, and they want to make sure that there are dollars there for all of us who want to develop renewable energy projects. And so part of it is community outreach. You're mailing out your 3x5s. The way that I see it playing out, if we're going to do this in Dillingham, I think I would have to get a hold of one of these village corporations and get them on board and present the project and have them really bring the project to the rest of the groups, and then mail out the 3x5s to their respective shareholders, get it out on the radio. I don't think newspapers are happening anymore, but online forums, or you're hosting an open house for your stakeholders. You basically invite your community out to listen about what do you got in your region, who your village corporations, what are their land, and how do we identify the project? Is it there? Can we capitalize on it? And how do we best make it happen pretty quick for everybody? So community engagement is really important. So one of the really cool things about this is it really establishes a grid tie. And a grid tie isn't just where you throw a wire and connect two communities. What you're doing is stabilizing that grid over here, and you're providing that grid with a reliable source of electricity in case their generators go out. And it saves them a lot of money, time, and energy. So the DOE people, they really love to see village corporations form tribal entity, and they want to see conglomerations, and they want to see grid enterprise, and they want to see communities engaging in these discussions and making these things happen. So the grid enterprise, that would be so what it mean, we're reducing our reliance on foreign oils, and when we do develop renewable energy, that's wind blowing out there. It's going through the wire and blow drying your hair and also heating your home. So how we make it happen? We're cleaning our air, land, and our water. We're providing career opportunities. We're giving ourselves our energy independence. We're opening land as previously locked to us. And it's a local tribal ownership. This project here in Dillingham that I discussed, this does not cross any state or federal land. It's all tribally owned land, and not tribally owned. Village corporation owned land. And what does that mean? That means energy sovereignty. It means you're making your energy decisions, and you're paving the way for the future. So that's where I'm at right here. I'm currently working in how do I reach out? And it's challenging, because you're dealing with human beings and we're all human beings. We're subject to what human beings are subject to, So we want to really figure out how to lay the foundation for these projects and bring them about in a way that is culturally respective to the respective village corporations who are moving forward with the renewable energy project. We want to make sure that they are the steering committee. They're the ones making all the decisions. And we really want to make sure that we just want to get them in the door, get them. Make sure that they are the ones making the decisions when it comes to their energy sovereignty and all the work that has to take place to make that happen. It's a challenge. And so forming relationships and keeping those lasting relationships is a really challenging thing. But yeah. Is there any questions? Looks like that's my last slide.
That was great. Thank you, Petla. Yeah, we'll go into our audience Q&A now. We have a few minutes for that. So if you haven't done so, please go ahead and send in your questions with the Q&A box. I see one question about funding opportunities or capacity. Can a small village with little funding and capacity get started on a renewable energy project? And maybe we can talk about opportunities, yeah. For
Every tribal entity, if you're federally recognized tribe, definitely you have that. You're the kings and queens of your region, and your position there is you're a conduit for federal dollars to reach Alaska and to distribute throughout Alaska and to fill in those gaps and fill out those positions and to give all those people jobs to make sure that this money is being allocated to renewable energy. So yeah, any tribal entity in Alaska is open and welcome to really look into the Department of Energy. There's so many financing opportunities.
you. Unless anybody else wanted to jump in, we have a question. I think Petla, you talked about this a bit, but what are some compelling ways or arguments to reach a tribal government who's not totally on board with energy diversity and renewable energy investment? This could be for anyone.
Yeah, that's a challenge, You're looking at how they're going to best represent the interests, the hearts and minds of their people. You're looking at the government responsible for a body of people and how they're going to best represent. Is it their best interest? And really hammering those points home. Is it really going to provide education? Is it going to provide that? Is it going to provide all the money? Is it going to provide jobs? Is it going to pay for itself? So looking at all the benefits and really bringing those home to any eligible tribal entity, I suppose, would be a good, compelling argument for reaching and really explaining how it's in their best interest in a respectful way. It's challenging. We all make mistakes and it's okay. Just keep pushing forward, keep moving.
Thank you. And then we have a question about what do you see as a myth about renewables that you'd like to see dispelled? Dr. Wight, would you like to take that one?
Sure. So I think the biggest one is just that they don't work in Alaska, right? Or, specifically for wind power, people think, oh, wind doesn't work in the winter. Actually, wind blows the strongest at night in the winter. So here in interior Alaska, right, like we are really looking to invest in big wind because that's when we need the energy the most, when it's the darkest and it's coldest. Same thing for solar, right? I think many Alaskans know that solar works because they've used it on their off-grid cabins, right? It is a remarkably versatile technology, and we are people that are pragmatic above all else. So when something works for us, we're going to keep using it. So I think the more people who see this technology deployed, the more people who see the benefits, the less and less we're going to have people saying, "Oh, I don't think it works."
Yeah, thank you for that. Just to keep our webinar to an hour and to respect everyone's time. I think that's all the questions we'll take for today, but thank you so much to all our speakers for being here, as well as for all your work in energy justice. And a recording of this webinar will be available on our website in the next couple of days, and it'll be sent to your emails as well. So thank you everyone for tuning in, and we will see you next time.